Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Maybe you could just begin with a brief introduction to this incredible film, incredibly unique as well. For people who don't know anything about it, what can they expect?
What can people expect? I would say a strange journey into something very Filipino.
Good summary. And maybe you could just kind of give us a bit of a glimpse into, the journey went on to create this film and the seed of the idea, which I believe kind of began with these kind of action films, which seem like they're kind of ubiquitous when you were growing up in the Philippines, and how that really is kind of seeped in to your culture, but also your own imagination as a creator,
Yeah.
as a filmmaker. So tell us a bit about how the idea first sprang up.
So it's right what you mentioned. It's a mix of all that. One part is my observation on how the Filipinos are obsessed with the action film genre or just obsessed with the ideas of celebrities. So growing up, our president was a former action star. And I remember it being normal. Like, oh, we have a lot of celebrities in politics. And even in our latest elections last May, the person who led the Senate elections is still an action star. We still have a lot of new government officials who are celebrities. And so I think that reflects a lot about how Filipinos think that they're characters that need to be saved by a hero type of thing. And I can resonate to that because I think I'm a person who sees life as one really long film that we continue to write and revise. So one part is that observation on the genre, and then one part is the existential crisis of how to write our lives well. So in Leonor, she tries to write a better version of her life. And I think we all are trying to write the best versions of our lives as we live it through. And I think one other part is I'm just like fascinated with wiser people. And so Leonor is based on a lot of people I look up to, my grandmother, writing mentors, people I just meet that make me realize why do they see so much beauty in this world and I hate it. So it's just, I think, also an attempt at understanding the world of others. So I guess when you ask me where did this start, it like started in so many with so many things, so many ideas. And I think it also reflects in the film. It just like is everywhere.
Mm. And of course, we never see a grandmother as an action star, and particularly in the action genre and the Filipino action genre, it's very macho, it's very male dominated. So I think the other thing that's very refreshing about the film is you're basically completely switching that lens, and suddenly putting kind of this tender, wise grandmother at the center of it all. So was that also a kind of key component for you?
Of course, in the Philippines, there would be like 300 films, 300 action films a year in the 70s or 80s, like including those that are shot in like 5 to 7 days. And none of them, well, so far in my research, were about an action star grandma. And it just fascinated me to have this person in a very macho genre. But in the case of Leonor, she is in a macho world, but the way she approaches violence, the way she approaches problems is through other means. It's through communication and love and tenderness and wisdom and just seeing people as humans that you're not supposed to hurt and do bad things to. So I just wanted also to explore how a woman is like in a macho genre. So that was a conscious thing as well.
And my next question was going to be the look and feel of the film. I think is also something that makes it incredibly unique, and the fact that there are kind of how you slip in the way that in the story we're slipping between reality and fiction. That's very much
Mhm.
represented in the way it's shot. So, what was your approach, and how did you kind of pull off all these different kind of set pieces, making us feel like we do plunge into this fictional world? And obviously that comes through in the look and the grainy look of the film, the kind of kitschy kind of action tropes that
Right.
come through there. So where did you even begin, and how did you make that all work?
Okay, what was our approach? We started by creating rules in each world. So me and our creative team, the production designer and cinematographer with the producers, so I made separate rules from the camera choices, lensing approach, color grading, coverage choices, acting techniques. I treated them as completely different films just to amplify the gap between the two worlds. And also, while thinking of the separate worlds, we wanted to be faithful to my experience of watching these action film replays on television. So these were shot on film, transferred to tape, played in television. So it's really like layers of damage. So it's meant to look not clean. And even the sound is 2 to 3 frames delayed. The ratio is as if it's played from a television, so it's 4:3. The CRT televisions from the 90s. And for the real world, I wanted it to feel more observational. So we used one lens as much as possible, one shot per sequence, but sometimes we would cut to a different shot if we needed more coverage. So it was based on, yes, creating the idea of having different worlds. So that was our approach. And so it was hard for us to transition when we were shooting an action scene and then the next day it's real world. It's like, oh, suddenly we're different again.
Mm.
That's why when we were shooting, we would cluster it. So just all real world, all action, and then real world again.
And in the sense that, it does explore to an extent kind of what you're saying there at the beginning, that, if you watch all these action films, do you begin to believe that, all problems can be solved with violence? And the contrast between the grandmother's approach and, the characters in the story. But did that put you in an unusual position of the fact that you were actually replicating those scenes of violence while also kind of commenting on them at the same time? So how did that relationship play out for you?
How did that relationship play out for me? I mean, we all know what the classic action Filipino film looks like. We know that it's always about killing the bad guys. It's always about this hero saving everyone in the neighborhood or the village. So having a character like Leonor just presents another perspective to it. Also, it's what I think is a more sensible thing to do, not just in an action world, but in, human sensibilities. So when you have a problem, violence is not the key at all. I think that's part of just a personal belief. And so many of the facets of Leonor are just coming from inside. And sometimes I don't think about it a lot. Yeah.
And tell us about your wonderful, wonderful cast, and of course, particularly, who plays Leonore, Sheila. I mean, how did you discover her? How did you work with her? I mean, she's crucial to kind of pulling off, moving between these different worlds, but also really empathizing and being on the side of her character.
Sheila is very close to how Leonor is like a strong, independent woman in an action world. She is a force in person and on screen. She's also very talented. She's a singer and a great stage actress. And when she read the script, I met up with her and asked her to read a few pages. She just felt like she made Leonor feel real, and that's really important for me. But one other reason why she stood out is that off camera, I just like her vibe. And my process of casting happens a lot off camera. I just like to sense comfort in people and I like to gather them all together. So when we're shooting, there's a space where we feel safe, comfortable, and happy. And that's one of my priorities to just, I think making a film should be enjoyable. So I usually base it on vibe, and then the next is how close they are to the role. And also, Sheila used to be a producer for advertising. So she also worked in the industry in some way. So she understands the character of Leonor, and also she helps us out in production. So there are many reasons why it was Sheila, and she was one of the last people we called in for a reading. Um, yeah, because it's really hard to find the right mix, and we were just very lucky after 20 plus casting days to find them all together.
And I'm almost out of time, but in terms of the things people can take away, I mean, I guess on one level, it's just kind of a roller coaster ride, and you're not exactly sure where this film's going to take you, and you can kind of go into this kind of imaginative world where we can slip between the real world and fiction. But it brings up lots of other kind of themes, preoccupations you have as a filmmaker, how we get to the end of our lives, perhaps want to go back and
Yeah.
have another go at editing and changing some of the decisions we made, and how much we feel in control of our own fate. So, what do you think some of the themes might be?
You're very right. What you described sounds like an existential crisis because it is a film about the existential crisis of many people, of Leonor, of the person who wrote the film, which is me, of the people who experienced the film, of just I guess it speaks also to just our natural nature, like what I mentioned. We function based on what we think is the next best decision. And that's our impulse because we want to write our lives well, even if the circumstances aren't available or aren't present. So it's also about what to us means what is a meaningful life. It raises questions like that. And I remember I did ask those questions when we were told that we had a film but didn't have an ending, and it was my producer who told me that. So that's a big word. That's a big idea or like a big problem for me because I was happy with it, and then suddenly someone tells me that it's incomplete. And so I remember being in the editing room beside my editor, and we were both looking at the timeline of Premiere, the editing timeline. And I was like, okay, so what are we gonna do now? We've exhausted all our ideas, tried all the versions, and it doesn't work. So I just asked him to screen record the screen, and then while he's editing, so I asked him to do a few things, and so he recorded the screen, and then we eventually put that in the film because when you look at an editing timeline, it looks so much like a lifeline with so many cuts that are uneven, so many layers with the sound and the different pictures all together. And I think it summarizes the film in some way that our lives are just very much like an editing timeline. They're very much like a script, very much like a lifeline. So it's these images that just amplify the existential crisis. So yeah, those are the themes. And even in the end, when we couldn't find an ending, I started to um ask people, so what do you think should be the ending? Ask our actors, and then I would record our conversations, and it's the conversation that appeared in the film. So it's really, I guess, finding help and solutions with the people who are with you in this, and eventually things will piece up together.
Mm. And
Yeah.
just super quickly, how what did it mean to you to have that response, have it show at Sundance first of all, and have the response that it did, and now obviously reaching a UK audience, and especially after the kind of blood, sweat, and tears. I think it was 8 years in the making. So what was that moment like for you?
What was that moment like for you? That was nice. It was unexpected. It's surreal. I'm still surprised every time we have a new screening. I'm still overwhelmed, shocked. I don't know why this is happening. I feel super lucky. I think part of it is timing, but part of it is also probably the joy we had making this transcended to the people taking this film in. So I'm happy that people beyond our key staff or just our staff liked it. And this was a film that we knew wasn't for everybody. So we knew that we were going to have a hard time finding people to like it. So now that we have a lot of screenings, we've traveled a bit, and we're now online in the Philippines, it just makes us feel nice that we're not alone. in wanting to make this weird film happen.
And it's also
Then
a
it
great
works out
window
good.
into Filipino culture, and it does feel like, are we seeing, more and more of Filipino actors and actresses and filmmakers and their work being shown. I was thinking of Dolly De Leon in Triangle of
Oh,
Sadness, how
yes.
much kind of how much of a platform she's been given from that film. So do you feel like, that your culture is kind of getting more of a look in right now in terms of film?
Yeah, very much. I appreciate the recognition, but since you brought it up, I realized that for me, the most special moments of having Leonor exist is when we're screening abroad and an overseas Filipino worker approaches me and tells me that the film reminds him of home or her of home. And that's such a, I don't know, it just makes us feel warm to have someone remind their place of home, even if they're not there. So it feels like, okay, we have found the connections we've always wanted to have.
Absolutely. Well, I'm out of time, but thank you so much for sharing all that with me. And I can't wait for everyone else to see the film here in the UK. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much,
Good to
Shara.
chat to
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Alright.